from Joe's mom's basement, it's the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and I think most of us don't tell the people who are on our air quote board of directors that they're on our board. Joe, I know I'm pretty much the chairman of your board, but you've never once told me that I'm on your board of directors.
There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of moving pieces that are going on when it comes to retirement. You've got your required distributions, which have changed over the last 5 years from 70.5 to 73. They're changing to 75. There are some years in there where they weren't required because everybody was sick. So F it. You don't need any money, apparently. We don't need to tax you on it. I don't know the logic behind that, but whatever. There used to be lots of tax bills associated with that. If you screwed it up, they went, we're just going to change that too. So there's a lot of stuff going on with the IRA world of you saved money and now the IRS is saying you have deferred the taxes long enough. It is time for you to start paying income taxes. You don't have to consume the money. You don't have to, your required distribution this year is 10 grand. You don't have to go spend 10,000 in the economy, but we're going to tax you as if you earn 10,000 bucks. And you're going to pay us that tax money. What you do with the money is up to you. So you've got that going on.
Hey everyone, welcome to a live recording of the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe Saul-Sehy, and I'll introduce all these characters here in just a moment. But I'd like to welcome you. You aren't used to seeing us on a Tuesday. This is actually a quick turnaround. I've been traveling. I've had a lot going on in my life, as some of you may have heard from the show. Big thanks to OG and Doug, neither of which are here today. So I like thanking them when they're not here, but for covering for me the last few weeks. But we are recording today. You'll hear it live on Friday, but the cool thing today, you'll hear it with all the warts, which is kind of fun. I'll be reading for Doug for our participants here. So I'll be doing my best to be the part of Doug, and we're going to fill him in later. So you'll see through the miracle of editing how we make this happen. At the midway point, we'll say hello. We generally, unfortunately, because it's the live recording of a show we're going to perform, for you now, but we're going to release later. I'm not going to be able to say hello much to you guys, but we will stop at the halfway point. Say our contributors can stay with us for a minute or two at the end. We can answer any questions you guys have and hang out for just a moment. So that is enough preamble. I think we're ready to go. Normally right here, I'd say, okay, Doug, you ready? But I'm playing that part. So Live from the basement of the YouTube headquarters, it's the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. On today's Roundtable, we're talking investing and the 5 types of wealth with the host of the Money for the Rest of Us podcast, David Stein. Also joining us is the woman who lives to help you invest in yourself from Amplify My Wealth is financial planner, Alissa Maizes. And finally, the guy who could sell stock and kindness from Earn and Invest, it's Doc G. But that's not all. Halfway through the show, I'll share my winding trivia question. Is that foreshadowing? And now a guy who's going for the gold in podcasting. It's Joe Saul-Sehy. I can't do it. Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. Glad you're here with us. And thank you, Doug, for the great introduction. We have some fun today because we've got a great cast who are all gold medal worthy when it comes to, we're a week away from the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. Can you believe that's coming up already? Let's say hi to the guy who's who orchestrates our brother podcast. Doc G is here. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. And I like that brother podcast. I never called it that before.
Well, I think when Crystal's here, we got to talk about her having the sister podcast. So you might as well have the brother podcast, right?
Very exciting and very excited to be part of the Stacking Benjamins network in general.
Yeah. And here are 2 people who we consider part of our outer network. First of all, from Amplify My Wealth, Alissa Maizes is back. How are you?
Hi, how are you? So glad to be here.
I know. So it is hotter than hell right now, Alissa, in Texas. It's got to be in southern Florida. Like, I can't believe you're wearing clothes. Like, it's got to be all humidity all the time now.
Well, there is a video and it's live, so I thought I'd be family friendly. But yes, it is so hot in Florida, but it's even hotter everywhere else. So we actually have relatively good weather in Texas and Florida now.
An egg on the sidewalk outside of Las Vegas. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Tell everybody, by the way, a little bit about your practice at Amplify My Wealth. And you're all over social media too, especially Instagram.
Yes, I love sharing all different tips on financial literacy. And I just think it's so important to make the conversation normal amongst as many people as possible because it increases the chance that people feel comfortable with their finances. So I love bringing that into my practice where I help women and their families, as well as young adults who are just getting started on their financial journey. So I help them with a plan and advice. And I just love doing it because I also work on removing the mindset barrier that a lot of people have going into trying to amplify their wealth. So for me, it's really personal. I just love being able to provide the tools for as many people as possible, whether it's on Instagram or with my clients.
Have you, speaking of that, I've seen videos of you and your own kids, Alissa. It looks like you have fun talking money with your kids. Your kids good with money?
You know, they are. I'm lucky. One just turned 23 last week, and another one will be 21 in a few weeks. And I am grateful that my kids are great with money, but I have to say my 23-year-old who's a year out of college blows my mind because he has already put together spreadsheets that are coded and everything. So he can figure out his own finances for retirement. And he's discussed the concern, even though he has a great job and he saves as much as he can and enjoys his life. But the concern amongst a lot of younger people of being able to save enough so they can have a place that they own and live in. So I just find it mind-blowing. So he's in that stage. My other son has one more year of college, but he's a serial entrepreneur. So I'm grateful that they're both mindful about their money.
That is spoken like a true mom, and rightfully so. If I was thinking about any of that stuff, Alissa, I would have been much better off. A guy who, well, let's see if he was thinking about this at 23 or at 33. David Stein is here. David, were you thinking about money management at 23 years old?
Oh yeah. That's why I studied finance. I was thinking about money at 12. when you come out of poverty, you think about money a lot. And so I wanted to figure out how not to be poor. So yes, I thought about it.
I think that is, hold on a second. I keep freezing. And I just realized we had our carpets cleaned here in the basement, and I realized I did not hook up the hardwire. So I'm going to take a second. I'm going to change over to the hardwire so I stop freezing, because I also have a delay. These are the warts we talk about, guys, when you watch us live. So hold on for a second, everybody.
I thought it was just me.
No, yeah.
I thought it was just me too, so I didn't want to say anything.
Yeah.
It's actually funny because when we do this live, like half the time it works perfect, and then half the other time something happens. But for anyone listening on YouTube right now, this is how the sausage is made. Doesn't always work.
His carpets look good.
Yeah.
They look very clean.
I'm used to seeing Joe in that space because he always records from there, and yeah, it's looking good.
Yeah, good.
I was like, I never freeze, and I'm freezing all the time.
As he says that, he freezes.
Exactly. So freezes.
Let's see if I got everybody back now. And probably better than ever. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yep. Everybody's moving normally now. That wasn't happening a couple minutes ago. All right. All right. David, I'm coming back to you. 3, 2, 1. David, so maybe I needed to know you sooner. And then maybe I would have thought about it by the time I was 23, or heck, at least by 33. But you've been up to something, not just money with the rest of us, money for the rest of us rather, but also you have an app that when I saw you at FinCon last year, you had a new app coming out. Tell me about that.
Yeah, sure. So we just completed 10 years of money for the rest of us. But one of the things we found is, we've always run a membership community, but we couldn't even share with our members a graph showing the valuations, like the PE ratio of emerging market stocks, or really, all these tools that are locked behind Wall Street, or where we were paying $100,000 a year for data. And so we decided, we're going to democratize investing tools and created Asset Camp, which is basically it gives individuals an understanding of index funds and ETFs. What's under the hood? What are their earnings? What is the dividend yield? What drove performance? And it's been about a year. You continue to iterate, but that's what we're working on, is how can we better help individual investors analyze index funds and ETFs, as well as the bond market.
That's in the bond market, which has always been very opaque.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would have been partly because, even as an institutional advisor, we couldn't get good bond data. We have to beg for it from bond managers. And so we have a licensing agreement with Bloomberg. We have licensing agreements with MSCI, and then we built the tools from there to share. And so we really, the education is the mission, and this is just a better way I kind of liken it to IKEA. With IKEA, you buy a piece of furniture and you put it together and it feels like, hey, I made furniture. We're doing the same thing. We're giving people the tools, but then we do monthly webinars, show them how to use them. What are these 600
Wait a minute. Wait, David, do I have to put this app together myself?
No, you don't. No, but we'll help you. You can look. It's like having data. I mean, it's like to be able to see what drove the stock market. Why, for example, international stocks have underperformed for 10 years.
Yeah.
The U.S. market. Why? Well, we like to put numbers to it. How much was currency, the strengthening dollar? How much was the fact that non-U.S. stocks got cheaper while U.S. stocks got more expensive? And so to be able to quantify that, to give us kind of the comfort to say, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't fire my international stock ETF. Maybe I should keep it in there because it has a higher expected return. And I can see what contributes to that return.
God, we need that evidence right now. I get so tired online of people saying I'm dumping my international. I'm like, oh, that's going to end well. That is
exactly right.
Yeah. What's the website, David? Where can people find it, or find it on the App Store?
It's assetcamp.com, ASSETCAMP.com. It's not actually on the App Store, so it's a web-based platform. It is mobile optimized, but That's
Awesome.
the URL, assetcamp.com.
Yeah, we'll link to all three of our amazing contributors, wonderful projects at stackingbenjamins.com in the show notes. And the piece that we're talking about today, we're talking about 5 different types of wealth. And you know what? This is already exciting, Alissa, but you know what makes it even more exciting?
Tell me.
The fact that this episode is brought to you by State Farm. That's what makes it even more exciting. In the market for small business insurance, State Farm knows your business is your life. State Farm agents are small business owners too, so they know what it takes. They can help you create and personalize your insurance plan, one that will fit your small business needs and budget. Small business insurance from State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Talk to your local agent today. State Farm always is a sponsor of these Friday Roundtable episodes. We have other fantastic sponsors that keep this free for everyone. We need to hear from another one right now, and then we'll get started. 3, 2, 1. Alissa Maizes is here. David Stein, Doc G. Let's get this show on the road. Our piece today comes to us from our buddy Fritz's site, the Retirement Manifesto, a fantastic blog. Fritz has been doing this now for quite a long time. And he is talking here about the 5 types of wealth. And this actually wasn't his idea at first. He got this originally from reading James Clear's newsletter. James Clear, by the way, let me brag a little bit. James Clear, for his little book Atomic Habits, had the same editor as my amazing book, Stacked. I'm like, what the hell's the name of my book? Stacked. Anyway, James Clear and I have a lot in common. Same editor, same publisher, but people think of us together all the time. James Clear and Joe. Yes. But one of us had to get all the accolades. So I went ahead and gave it to James. But he talked about 4 different types of wealth. Fritz adds a 5th one. We'll talk about that in a second. But Alissa, let's start with you because, the number one type of wealth, anybody that listens to this channel is thinking about one type of wealth, right? How do I have more money? We think about financial wealth. Heck, when we look at our New Year's resolutions, one of the biggest New Year's resolutions we always have is ways to earn more, right? Is that a trap, just thinking only about financial wealth?
It definitely can be, although I do see that a lot of people don't focus on accumulating wealth as much as they should for their future. So I'm thinking maybe it's not as much of a trap, but I do think the importance is that people really balance and use their wealth, their financial wealth, so they can also have the other types of wealth that we're going to speak about and really balance that based upon your values. And that's something I always focus on and we've discussed before, Joe, is what do you value most? Because when you start thinking about your values, that's when you see the different types of wealth that we're going to speak about today.
Well, maybe then, Doc, this is, if you agree with Alissa, the trap of financial wealth is only something that our biggest money nerds suffer from, right? But you and I know a bunch of these people that all we think about is, man, if I just have more money, if I just have a little more money.
Yeah, I mean, I think money is a tool and not a goal, and therefore it's one of the tools in your toolbox. And as we'll talk about today, there are all sorts of other tools in your toolbox. And so what I like to tell people, especially when they're at the beginning of this road and they're feeling like they don't have a lot of that tool, which is money, thankfully there are all these other tools that we can utilize so that we can feel like we're living a rich and wealthy life, even when maybe our net worth isn't exactly where we want it to be.
David, being not only a finance major, but to use your words, thinking about this from the time you were 12 years old, have you found that to be too much of a focus for you over your lifetime? Like, what I need to think less about money and maybe more about other pieces of my life?
No, because when I was 12 or 13, I sort of OD'd on making money and reading, Dale Carnegie and Think and Grow Rich and all that stuff. So by the time I got to college and grew up, I realized, these other forms of wealth are incredibly important. And we give up those types of wealth. We give up time. We give up potentially our social life. We give up, in some cases, people give up their health trying to get money. And so the key is the balance. And that's what I've tried to maintain even early in my career. I remember I was in my 20s starting my first job, and I'd see these guys going up in the elevator and you could tell they hated your job. I mean,
Yeah.
I promised myself I am not going to be 45 or 50 going to some job up in some high rise in an elevator that I hated. And these were all tend to be bank employees, which, it's a tough environment if you're a banker. And so it's always, in my mind, been a focus on the other elements of wealth, and the money will come.
I remember seeing that, David, when I was at American Express. Just people. I remember one guy telling me, who was late in his career as I was beginning, he said, you know what? I always thought my family would thank me for all the hours that I put in. He goes, what's funny is they grew without me and I didn't grow with them, which is why he's divorced. He's estranged from his kids, and he worked a ton of time. And for what at the end?
Well, right. Yeah, no, you have to be proactive in thinking about it and how you're using your time.
Alissa or Doc, have either of you guys found you falling into this trap as well, that maybe overly focusing on money?
Well, I definitely feel that I have a vigilant mindset as far as money goes. So it definitely is something, whatever your money mind says, you likely have something you could work on to improve upon it, so you enjoy different aspects of wealth. And so I'm definitely that person who, once I realized I was on track to reach the goals that I wanted to reach, I finally realized, wait, if I'm on track, then I need to make sure I'm enjoying the life that I have and enjoying the things that I do. So yes, you saw those videos with myself and my kids. I make sure that I have time with my family. I also make sure that I have those intentional splurges. And it's definitely a little bit more challenging for someone who's vigilant with their money, but I've learned to work on that and make sure that I don't hold back on the things I really want to do and value.
Doc, you?
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, one of the hardest times in my life from a mental health standpoint was actually when I realized I was financially independent. And the reason why was I had been letting this mirage of wealth pretty much take up all my time. And so I hadn't put a lot of time into thinking about who I want to be or what I want to do with my life, or what does living look like outside of making money. And so for a certain percentage of my life, I certainly did. Now, it's not that I didn't build relationships or have kids or do all those kind of family things, because I did all of that, but I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about who do I want to be and what feels really purposeful in my life. And so for me, it was definitely a moment of both enlightenment and anxiety. And it took a while to really figure out, well, who am I outside of this kind of mirage of wealth when money doesn't define me? And when my job, in this case, because I burnt out at being a doctor, what does then define me? So it was a difficult time.
Well, but the opposite side of, though, I think for a lot of people, Doc, is that they never get there. Like, it's not even on their radar that they're financially independent. And Alissa, I guess I'll go back to you, because you brought up that for the vast majority of Americans, we're not saving enough, right? We're not doing enough. So I guess financial wealth, building that pillar first, might be the first place to the first place to start. But why? I guess why? I don't even know how to ask this. Why don't more people think about financial? I feel like everybody thinks about financial wealth. Everybody always, I mean, on Instagram, all I do is see rich people, right? More car, more house, more stuff. And I think most of us think that equates to more wealth. So on one hand, we're obsessed with it. I'm not even asking you a question. I'm pontificating, but I don't know how to, do you know what I'm trying to ask you? Like, where are we getting this wrong with financial wealth if we're not saving enough, and yet it's around us all the time?
Well, I think part of it is who we surround ourselves with. So, one of the areas of wealth being social, it's definitely important to have a social life. And it's an important part of our life, but it's also, who are we surrounding ourselves with? Are we surrounding ourselves with people who are trying to lift us up so we can do both? We can have, the social and the time, and we can have enough money. Or are we surrounding ourselves with people that are spending, and that equates to your happiness? And then in that case, you want to be with those people, but how do you change that pattern? Because I know there are people that I have spoken to, and that's a real challenge once they realize they want to start accumulating wealth and make that change. And, to what you were saying, it's usually because of your money mindset. It always goes back to that. So how to make those changes when you really like your friends, but your friends are part of your challenge to accumulate wealth?
Yeah. What do you do then?
Yeah. I mean, I
Do I just say,
suggest to
Alissa,
people,
Alissa, I can't hang out with you anymore because I think you're a loser now, and I need some new friends.
You could do that. You could just ghost me. There are all different ways. But I do feel that it's important. What I would choose to do and what I ask people to consider doing is, if these are your friends and you know you really care about them and you want them in your life, to either have the conversation with them in a way that's comfortable. So for instance, maybe Joe, you keep on saying we need to go to that expensive restaurant. And I say, you know something, I have an idea. I know you love playing games. Why don't you come to my house with your wife and we'll all play games and order a pizza? Because now I've taken control over the financial part. And I know you like games. So I'm not going to feel uncomfortable. Maybe you won't want pizza because you're training for a marathon. But other than that, I'd feel comfortable starting with that conversation. But sometimes having those open and honest conversations about money, you actually realize your friends are grateful because chances are they're going through the same thing you're going through and they should be saving more money too. So maybe you share your journey with them, that you are trying to prioritize your retirement. It doesn't mean you can't afford it, or you say you don't have to, make it be about shame. Instead, you could just be honest and say, I'm really trying to prioritize saving for retirement. So I'm just trying to spend differently. I love our time together. Yeah. Let's think about some things to do.
The games, I feel seen. Heck, the pizza, I feel seen too. And even though I am training right now, I'm not a quitter, Alissa. So I'd do the pizza. I would promise myself that I'm just going to run it off tomorrow. Yeah. Doc, you had something on this as well.
Yeah, let me try to give a succinct answer to why we're both surrounded by these messages about money, and yet most people aren't financially savvy. Listen, we're surrounded by these messages about money because we have influencers who are trying to make money off of you, and we have marketing and business people who are trying to sell you something, and they're all trying to sell you purpose, whether that's being a billionaire or traveling or having six-pack abs. They want to sell you something. And so what they're doing is they're giving you this sense of purpose and they're putting it on a plate and they're saying, go after this. But secretly, they know it's enriching them. Now, a lot of us see these things, and most of us really just don't have the ability to become billionaires or travel all the time or get six-pack abs. So we're going after this thing that we don't have agency to actually achieve. We're trying to take on someone else's version of purpose and make it our own because we're being sold this lot of goods. The problem is a lot of us have no idea what actually looks like purpose to us, whether that's something like playing games with friends or skateboarding or collecting baseball cards. A lot of us aren't clear at what that is. Now, if we turn that around and actually get clear about what purpose looks like in our life, it's much more likely we can then build a financial life around that. If your version of purpose and what really lights you up is playing board games with friends, guess what? You don't have to save 50% every year. You can save 10% every year. You can do a job that is mediocre to you, and you can spend every night and weekend playing board games with friends. And if you put purpose first, it actually makes the finances a lot more clear. But the lot of goods we're being sold by all these external forces is really clouding our judgment. And so what we get is people who talk about money a lot, but no one's really listening.
Yeah, but Doc, I can hear Stacker Jane right now yelling into her device. And I'm only picking on Jane because she said what I think a lot of people are thinking. Thinking about purpose, Doc, freaks you out. It freaks you out. Like you're looking into the void and you've got this, I need to leave a legacy. I've got all this big stuff I'm supposed to do. And yet I'm messing around playing board games. My purpose. Are you kidding me? Like, where do we begin that journey? So Jane is not freaking out.
So my book, The Purpose Code, comes out in January of 2025. But
you guys think about it for the next 6 months and I'll get back to you. Is that what you're saying?
So what I'm saying is that the studies show that having a sense of purpose in life increases your health, longevity, and happiness. And yet 90% of people have a sense of purpose and anxiety at some point in your life. So the truth of the matter is it is this paradox. And I believe it's partially because we look at purpose wrong. We think purpose has to be this big, audacious thing where we change the world. But the truth of the matter is most of where purpose really lies are in those little things we love to do. It's abundant and not scarce. So if your purpose is to become a billionaire or have six six-pack abs or spend all your time traveling the world, most likely you don't actually have agency to achieve those things. You might not have enough money. You might not have enough time. You might not have the right genetics in order to plan that out. And you might not be lucky. And so if we go for these big things, which we have very little agency to achieve, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. On the other hand, if we decide that, hey, guess what? Playing board games with friends lights me up. And then you start doing that authentically. Well, guess what? You're going to hang out with people on a regular basis. When you hang out with people on a regular basis, you end up making projects. Like you become teacher and mentor, mentee. You start doing bigger things. So maybe it starts as I'm playing board games with friends, but maybe Joe Saul-Sehy, who is also a financial expert, decides one day to make a game with his friend that teaches finances. And maybe that game becomes sold at all the big stores and people buy it and they play this game with their kids, and then their kids become financially savvy. And all of a sudden, this little purpose, this thing that seemed unimportant, actually changes the world. So I think the legacy argument is a weak one. And most people who actually think they have to have a big legacy actually never achieve the thing they want to do. And therefore they have no legacy anyway. If you want to be Mickey Mantle and you put your whole life to playing baseball, guess what? Most people fail at that. If that's your version of purpose, instead of leaving a legacy, you're going to die in disappointment.
Why in your analogy do you take my hobby and turn it into a job where all of a sudden I'm making board games and working with shippers and Target? And don't do that to me.
Here's the beautiful thing. You don't necessarily have to make it in a job. We know, and Fritz talks about this, I believe, in his article, the Harvard Adult Health Study shows that it's actually personal relationships that change the world and that make us happy. Even if you don't create a game and ship it, etc., most likely you're going to connect to another human being. And that human being at some point is going to need you, and you're going to be there for them. And that's the beginning of legacy. By you being there for them, you create some stability. Maybe you help them. Maybe you create a model for your own children or your spouse or their children. And that's where legacy really occurs, because that's how you have an impact generations ahead, is when you do those little things that change people around you and they go live their lives and bring about positive change.
Well, let's dive into this, because number 2 on Fritz's list is, as you just mentioned, is social wealth. David, back to you for a second. You agree with this, that social wealth, like that's a currency, social wealth?
Not a currency. I think social wealth is the point of life. I just been reading the Taoist texts the last couple of years. I talked about a little bit on the podcast, Tao Te Ching, Zhuangzi. And the key learning from that is connection is the key. Doc, you mentioned connection. It's the ability to connect with others, not use people or look through people to get what we want. It's just a simple act of being with them and not having to, and that's how we use our time. The time is to be connected with people and stop rushing off to the next thing. That's the purpose of life. And, money will come. You'll get opportunities. I just read an article we just did an episode on 7 steps to living a long life. And one of them is eat good food and eat it with other people. And we referred to an article in the Financial Times where a guy mentioned that in France, lunches take a long time, dinners take a long time, and you don't talk business at your lunch or dinner. The whole point is to have connection. And then maybe that earns you the right to have a phone call about business. But the whole point is to be there with people, feel their humanity, show empathy. And that's what life's about.
But David, this is kind of I don't know if it's my pedestal lately or my annoyance lately. As I get older, I see people retiring, right? Not going on to the next thing, but retiring and moving away from all their friends, moving away from the community. I don't know. The older I get, the more I think, David, that's a colossal mistake. If this is what life is all about, why am I retiring? And all of a sudden I leave my whole support system.
Well, no, I agree. And that's where it takes a long time to make friends, and it takes time to spend with them. And part of the things you have to do is stop waiting around for people to invite you to something. LaPro and I invite people all the time, and sometimes they can come, sometimes they're not. But yeah,
Mine
you don't
must
want
have
to lose your
gotten lost in the
connection.
mail.
But
I'm
you know
sorry.
what? If you move away, plan on coming back so you can hang out with your friends. And that's something that we do. We travel a lot, but we have friends in Idaho, we have a friend in Arizona, friends in Ohio, and we visited you in Texas on one of our trips.
That was fantastic.
And so I'd rather see somebody over dinner than go to a conference.
Yeah.
Just because they're not running on to the next thing. They're actually there with you. You can take your time, but it does take an investment to make that connection, and it requires inviting people.
Well, and after joking about that I must have got lost in the mail, my trip way out to visit you, I realized that you came to my town and visited me. So I need to shut my mouth, David.
Well, exactly. But you're welcome anytime. You just reach out. We're around. You were just in Boise. You were 4 hours from us, and you weren't over here. We're the prettier side of the state.
It was a great conference though, but yes, I should have made my way over there since I was only 4 hours away, relatively close at that point. Alissa, I think that this is important enough, this idea of social wealth, because I'm completely on board with what David said. I know you well enough to know you're completely on board with this, that maybe it deserves, for finances, we have systems. David talked about his app and how he, is helping people dig under the hood. You as a financial planner help people build systems right around their money so that they can enjoy their life. What are some systems that you've done in your life to help you continue to build social wealth with the people around you?
So first of all, I'm thinking about that financial part, because that's the balance again. If you need to travel to stay in touch with those friends, I think that's important too. So I just wanted to address that. So some of the things that I discuss with people to help them, if I notice that they don't have money set aside for social things, I always ask them about that, because I think it's important. So even though they're trying to pay off their debt and they're trying to cut back expenses, I think it's important as part of anyone's plan, financial or otherwise, is to figure out what it takes to be in touch with those people that are important to you, to be social. Certainly, if they're nearby, it's a lot less expensive. But for myself, everyone's in the Northeast in my family. So I need to be able to fly back and forth so I could go see them. Or if I'm in a city where my family doesn't have room for me to stay, or it's more comfortable to stay elsewhere, I have to include that too. So I think it's really important to look at what it takes to have the social connections that are important to you, and make sure that you balance having enough money for that. Because certainly if you don't work a lot, let's say the work-life balance, you want to have more free time, but you don't have enough money to do the things you want to do to stay socially connected, that isn't ideal either. So to try and figure those things out. And one of the things I think about what you had mentioned, Joe, about retirement, I think more and more, some people don't retire because they really like what they do. So I think ideally, if as people are getting older, they could think of things, whether it's a volunteer thing that keeps them connected to people to create new friendships, or it's something else that they could continue doing that they choose that they could continue to do, could really make a difference. And maybe you could make some money in the meanwhile, or not have to spend a lot of money, such as volunteering. You could go and be social with people and not spend a penny. You could volunteer in a food pantry or a soup kitchen. And a lot of times I've done that before. And people who are retired, they treat that like a job. They're there the same days every week. And it's like having a job, except when you want to go visit your family or friends, everyone is so understanding, right? So I like to think of those ideas to really balance things so you could carry through what's most important to you in your life throughout your life. It's
funny you mentioned that, because I am definitely not retired, and I think a lot of our stackers are not. But but I still, tonight I'm going to a meeting for, and I'm definitely not a poster child for, being well-rounded. But I do think that getting involved in my community and going to this nonprofit meeting tonight and taking part with these people is fantastic. And that face-to-face time with people in your community is so important. By the way, there's a book that I just finished. It took me a long time because I had a lot going on, but this woman, Catherine Price, talked about the power of fun. And I've mentioned her several times, but the first couple chapters, Alissa, are all about, the way to have more fun in your life is to put down this thing. For people not watching us on YouTube, put down your phone And because this is the thief of fun. And she goes through all of the scientific problems, which, Doc, you might have seen with all the, it steals dopamine from everything else that you do, because you get your dopamine hit from the phone. But what's funny is, at the end of the book, after she talks about all these different ways to have fun, she goes into what we're talking about now, this social idea. And she said, I'm putting this at the end of the book because I want to make sure that you heard correctly that you should put your phone down. But she goes, you know what's crazy? We have one device that can help us get closer to people. And if we used it systematically, would be great. It's your phone. And the fun thing is you can actually turn your phone on, and believe it or not, you can put 9 digits in and it will call, or 10 digits, it will call people. And so she says, forget about the apps, forget about texting, forget about all this stuff that doesn't bring us together. But if we actually hear each other's voice and talk to each other, and then she goes through all the positive pieces of that and building powerful stuff. So absolutely recommend that book. My sister-in-law does that really well, by the way. I realized a few weeks ago, I get a call from her every Sunday around between 11 and 12. She just sets the time aside and calls the people that are important to her to make sure that they stay. Which
Do you answer, Joe?
Oh my goodness, it's her. No. It's really fun to talk to her. What's fun about it, David, is that actually, what's not fun about it, what's embarrassing about it is I don't think enough about returning about that, and about how important that system she has is, and how I should implement that in my life. If I took an hour a week and just called people, I feel like, professionally, like having a CRM for my friends. Do any of you guys have like a CRM for your friends that you go through and think about? Like, I don't. Doc shaking his head. Alissa?
No, but it's interesting because in that Harvard study, there were some TED Talks that are part of the article that you shared with us. And in that, he suggested taking the time and reaching out to people. So I definitely think that's a great system. I know you're a big goal setter. I like setting goals too. So maybe it's, how to stay in touch with those people, and whether it's to make a phone call, make plans, whatever it is, even send a text is better than not being connected at all.
Doc, to you, and then we're going to the break.
Oh, I was going to say, I'd like to actually be a little counterintuitive here. So the studies, as I was talking about, say that having a sense of purpose in life leads to more happiness, longevity, and health. And yet the Harvard study says that basically people who have more connections are the ones that are happiest. So I would take those two together and say, actually, purpose is the way to bring you to connections. So as opposed to calling people because it's the weekly time or because they're a family member, let's take a page out of Fritz's handbook. Fritz has found a great sense of purpose in his life by this charity him and his wife set up, and where they build fences for dogs so that dogs don't have to be chained anymore to like a link. If they build the fence, then the dog can run free. This has become a huge sense of purpose in his life. And because of that, they now have hundreds of volunteers. And not only do they go build these fences, they end up going to the bar afterwards and having a drink. These are the people they call to socialize now with too, as well as to do their job, as well as to do this purposeful thing. So I would say, don't schedule a call every 2 weeks. Don't do that kind of stuff. What you want to do is you want to develop this really abundant sense of purpose around things you love. And that's what's going to give you those connections. Again, if Joe's the example, Joe wants to do a lot of playing board games with people because that's where he's really going to create those connections that are deeply meaningful, as opposed to just either filial or someone you feel like you have to call on a regular basis.
I think there's a longer conversation there, but I don't think it has to be either or. I really want to get to the break, because I don't think there's anything wrong with what my sister-in-law Laura is doing. I think it's great. You're right, though. It could be even more. Yeah. And if I find, like to David's point, that I'm not nobody's accepting my call, well then maybe my time's not that well spent. Hey, at the halfway point of every Friday episode, we have a fight to the death, a year-long fight, not to the death, but to the end of the year, with our three longtime contributors, which are OG, and today we'll have Doc G play for OG to keep the G's the same. Paula Pant from Afford Anything, and Alissa will just keep gender the same there, make it easy for me to remember who's who. So you'll be on Team Paula. And then David, that means that you're playing for my mom, who never likes to negotiate the stairs, so she's not going to come down and play. So you're playing for her. But that means, David, there is some good news and some bad news about today's competition. You want the good news or the bad news first?
Good news.
The good news is, wait a minute, hold on a second. Steve, we're going to cut there. I forgot, Jordan, you were on the last episode that we did.
I think
who the hell won that? Did you win it?
No, I lost.
No. Who won it?
Jesse Kramer won it, but I don't know who he was playing for.
So
he got the number exactly right. Yeah, he got 19. It was the number of.
That's right. It was Jesse, Paula, and
so Paula's playing for herself. Jesse must have been playing for your mom.
Yeah,
but I was playing for OG.
Yeah. So okay. So yep. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Well, the good news, David, is. Did you say good news or bad news? By the way,
I say good news.
Okay, good. Here we go. Well, the good news is that Mom's in second place. She's not in last, which means you'll be guessing second. Doc, you are guessing first because OG has 10 points. He's got a massive lead. Mom has 7 points. And Alissa, the best news is, I'm going to make this the best news, not the worst news. The best news is you get to guess last because Paula has 6. So can Paula, aka Alissa, get it back into a tie with Mom and make things closer? We need Doug to give us a question so you guys can provide the answers. Doug, what do we got going on today? All right, here's Doug's question. Hey there, Stackers. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. The Tour de France is currently underway with 176 riders competing to win a giant gold goblet that's filled to the brim with gas station champagne. And don't you hate it when people say France? I mean, even French people sound bougie when they say it like that. I think I'll start a tour to Texas this winter. If I know anything about the French, it's that Texans can do anything bigger and better. Our race, like our Buc-ee's gas stations, will be bigger, of course, which automatically makes it superior. With all the open land out here, we could have way more people competing, maybe even thousands, like a marathon. And since we've got the Space Center here in Houston, I bet I could work something out with NASA where the winner gets like a chicken fried steak dinner with all the fixins in space. As far as the trophy goes, I'm thinking it should be an even bigger goblet, like a 10-gallon hat filled with the true champagne of beer. Nay, Miller High Life. You're so 1990. It'd be filled with Shinerbach, a Texas product. This is going to be incredible. Eat my brie, France. I wish I could do Doug better. But for now, some cyclists are stacking the French version of Benjamin's over there this month. So how about this? Today's trivia question is, what is the total distance of this year's Tour de France? It's as annoying as they are when I say it like that. I'm as annoying as they are when I say it like that. I'll be back right after I map out a route from Austin through Joe's mom's backyard and back. All right. 3, 2, 1. Distance. Doc, you get the pleasure of going first. Do you watch the Tour de France at all? Tour de France?
I don't, but I did, I think, watch one of those documentaries, like the F1 documentary. There was one on the Tour de France, and I think I watched an episode or two.
Cheryl and I watch almost every day while this is going on. And we don't do it, by the way, to really watch. The cycling is fun, but you really got to get into it. I'll tell you what is fun. It's like the Travel Channel. You see these beautiful French countryside. It's very, very relaxing. But anyway, I wanted to tell you that so you could start adding together how long you think this Tour de France is.
Well, as usual, Joe, I have a great answer for almost every question you ask except the trivia question. I'm guessing, I have no idea at all. And I'm going to help you guys out by telling you my reasoning so then maybe you can jump off it and get closer. I think I'm going to guess the Tour de France is 20 days. I have no idea how long it goes on. I'm going to guess it's 20 days, and I'm going to guess maybe they travel let's say 80 miles a day. So 20 days, 80 miles a day. What is that? 1,600 miles? That's my guess.
1,600 miles. And even though they probably do it in kilometers, because this is an American podcast,
we're Americans, damn it.
We will do it in miles. Damn the French. David, 1,600 miles. You think he's high or low?
Oh, he's
I think
higher.
He's low. He's low. Yeah, no, I was trying to remember how many stages it is. Seems like it's somewhere between 20 and 30 stages. They're biking at 25, 30 miles an hour. The typical stage, 4 to 5 hours. So I'm saying they're doing at least 100 to 120 miles a day. So I'll go with 2,500 miles.
2,500 miles. Well, Alissa, that gives you the over under here. Doc G at 1,600, David at 2,500. What do you think?
I'll say, that's a hard one. I'll say 1,800. I have no idea.
I was going to ask you for the math behind that because these two guys did math. You're just putting it through the uprights.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I think it's probably higher than the highest number, but I have no idea, so I'm just throwing it out.
Going in the middle. Do you ever watch the Tour de France?
No.
Well, fantastic. All right, we got Doc G at 1,600 miles, David at 2,500 miles, Alissa at 1,800 miles. We'll tell you who's going to win this thing in a minute. We'll be right back. All right, let's say hi to the people hanging out with us on YouTube just briefly. We've got a few. Hey, guys. Crystal is here. Crystal Hammond from our sister show, Doc.
She could have given me some help and given me a number. I mean, come on, Crystal. Help me out.
Katie is with us. Listen to Katie. Katie is at Harrah's in Las Vegas. She's at a casino listening to a financial podcast. How about that one? Aaron, nice job, Katie. That's good. Aaron, I hope you win, by the way. Aaron, hi from Titletown, Green Bay, Wisconsin. Well, it's not going to be Titletown this year because you're going against my Lions, which is bad news, Doc, for you and your Bears as well. So I don't. Do you follow the Bears?
Because I pay so much attention to such things.
Katie says, stop calling it a phone. Not you specifically. It's a palm top computer with a phone app. And that's why, Katie, we need to put it down right there. E. Boone with us from Portland. Glad you're hanging out with us again. Aaron, Joe, did you just say, Doc G, did you win last week? Does Doc G ever win? Aaron's throwing you some shade.
Well, it's right, though. I mean, it's right. I think I had a winning streak of 2 or 3 at one point. So it was very exciting. But if I'm going to be known for anything, it's going to be for my bad trivia answers. And I take full responsibility for that.
Well, we're about to find out if it's good or bad. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. And we're going to, Crystal, no, not the Bears. See, Crystal is also from Chicago, as you know, Doc, and she's wrong on this, and she went to Ohio State too, which is awful. So, Katie, thanks. It's a hack trip, $15 a night, no resort fee. Does that mean you got to sit through an hour and a half timeshare presentation, Katie? I donate $20 a day to keep my status. Nice. Which means maybe you're being comped the room, which would be cool. But does that mean she spent a lot of money at that casino before now? I don't know. I want to hear that story, Katie, but we'll hear it in the second half of this. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Doc, you started off at 1,600 miles after Alissa came in only 200 above you, and David, using some math, way above you. What are you thinking?
I think David's closest. I think his reasoning was better.
Well, David, you feel good?
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I watched the Tour de France sometime, but not enough to remember how many stages there are. I know it's most of July, but they have rest days.
It is fun. You find it fun too.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a cyclist, so I mean, I bike a couple days a week.
Yeah. I bike a couple days a year.
Well, that's because you're a runner.
That's right. But
biking is better than running because you don't bounce so much. Yeah, it's smoother.
I'm going to switch. I've got one more marathon in me, and then I'm switching to the bike for that very reason.
Yeah, I save your knees too.
Oh, my lower back is just pulverized. But Alissa, 1,800, you're right in the middle. Feeling good?
No.
Well, it looks like most people, it sounds like the team thinks David has it, but does he? Doug, what's our answer? Hey there, stackers. I'm cycling expert and large-scale event planner, Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. The first Tour de France was held in 1903 and lasted 19 days. It was started by the French cyclist and journalist Henri de Grange to help boost sales of his newspaper. Talk about stacking Benjamins, or I guess stacking francs, or then euros. Since then, the race has been held every year except in times of war. Today's trivia question: what is the total distance this year's Tour de France? Beginning this year in Florence, Italy. Do they know that's not in France? I can guarantee the Tour de Texas won't pull a stunt like that and start in Arkansas. The Tour de France is a 21-stage journey with 29 stage towns mapped out along the route. Most cyclists are assigned a variety of accommodations along the way so that any one team doesn't end up with all the best rooms. Even so, some teams go the extra mile or kilometer to make their cyclists as comfortable as possible, going so far as to outfit their rooms with their own bedding and even mattresses from home. Maybe even some, is it boudoir? I can't pronounce that. Boudoir, but boudoir. Boudoir. Some boudoir shots of Lance Armstrong to get them fired up.
Oh, no.
But I can't wait to hear him do that one. But how many miles is the route exactly? The total distance is 2,170 miles, which I think means just barely David wins, right?
David?
Really?
Or is it Alissa?
I think Alissa won.
I think Alissa.
It was 1,800.
Don't I get some good news?
She's 370 away, and David is 330 away. David wins.
Sorry.
Wow, that was a close one.
Unless you're disqualified if you're over, in which case I would have lost.
Yes, we got rid of that rule some time ago. So your gain, David. Congratulations. You need to make a victory speech now?
No, I'm proud for mom's sake.
Absolutely. Time for the second half of this discussion, which is brought to you by depositaccounts.com. Doc G, you know what happens when you go to depositaccounts.com?
I don't, but I'm sure you're going to tell us.
You do. You've heard this a million times.
Something about brick and mortar. That's all. You love brick and mortar. We're always talking about how
don't
the rates
love brick
you get
and mortar
at brick and mortar financial institutions do not stack up.
That's right. At depositaccounts.com, you can compare more than 275,000 deposit rates from over 11,000 banks and credit unions for free. I just pulled up depositaccounts.com, by the way, and you'll want to look this up because we're recording this a few days early. But savings accounts, the national average savings account rate, anybody want to guess? National average on a savings account?
0.7%.
0.51. Nice job, David. And you're optimistic though. If you're in the top 1%, which is hundreds of banks, 4.95%. Huge difference between the two. Savings accounts, CDs, checking, money markets, they compare the top 1% with the national average. You can see which are open to your state and your area. If you just go to depositaccounts.com by Lending Tree, get that savings account moving, or at least staying stagnant with inflation. Don't get killed by inflation. Let's dive into the second half of this. So we ended talking about social wealth, but next up is time wealth. And Doc, I know you've got a hot take here to kick off the second half about time wealth. You think we think about time incorrectly?
I think we do. The Bureau of Labor Statistics every year does a time use survey. And what they actually find is the average person has 5 hours of free time a day. But what's really interesting is people who are more wealthy have less free time. So if you want to have more free time, all you have to do is be poor. And they've done this study over and over and over again. It's not about how much free time we have, because you can't commoditize time. You can't buy it, you can't sell it, you can't trade it. It passes no matter what you do. It's more about what you do during those time periods. And so it's really more of a perception. Like, I am happier and busier than I've ever been in my life. I have much less free time, but that time is being used in much more purposeful ways, which feels a lot more fulfilling. So, I don't think any of us in the US don't have time wealth. At least the average person, whether rich or poor, has plenty of time wealth. The problem is we're not using that time in a way, or we're not filling that time in a way that actually fulfills us as people. And so it doesn't feel like we're doing a good job with it.
But he doesn't say in this piece, and I know our stackers, Doc, have not read this piece, but he doesn't say have more free time. He says prioritize accordingly, which sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, we have plenty of time to prioritize accordingly. Everybody does, because everyone has about 5 or 6 extra hours a day. It's just we have no interest in trying to figure out what we truly want to do in that time and then pursuing it. And so it's not a matter of time wealth. There's no such thing. We all have just the same amount of time, depending on how many years we live. It's that we're really bad at trying to figure out what activities we want to be engaged in that time. And so I think we might have a problem with purpose wealth. We might have a problem with trying to figure out what fulfills us, but the time actually isn't the issue at all. And I think by labeling it a time problem, we're really sending people in the wrong direction.
I don't know, David.
I think people, I agree. We have to, but people don't use their time wisely. In fact, we've seen this in the podcasting space. People are not consuming podcasts, which, I think is fairly good use of time, because the average person spends over an hour a day on TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube. So we have to be purposeful with our time is what we have to do, as opposed to just let it flow and do the lowest common denominator, which basically is to be entertained in 10-second, 15-second slices and be excited about what's going to show up next. And so time can be used purposefully. And I think that's the trick.
Do you agree then with Doc? Because what I'm dreaming of, as I heard Doc talk, was maybe taking out the calendar at the start of the week and filling up my day, like filling it up.
No, I don't agree with. I hate having things on my calendar, because I want the flexibility to do what is most intuitive to do, be that connection, help people learn something. But that's how I approach time. I'm not a list maker. I don't check things off my list. I don't do a list, because what's most important will make itself known in the moment. This thing on Stacking Benjamin is the only thing on my schedule all week that I had to write down, except I did go to a funeral today, but that was unexpected. And so I think there's different ways to approach time. Some people like to have it scheduled and they feel satisfied checking it off. And I think that's fine. Other people are more Zen-like in their approach to time. But I think it's being aware of how we use time and not just default to watching TikTok or watching YouTube, because it's way easier to have that chatter in our head rather than face what Doc's talking about is coming up with a purpose, or at least being curious about something that could lead to purpose. It's easier just to sit and be entertained.
Alissa?
So I would say I'm more of a hybrid, where I do love setting goals and I don't want them to slip through the cracks. So there are some things that I feel if I don't do them with intention, they might slip through the cracks, or maybe I realize I don't reach that goal that I really wanted to reach. So there's certain things that I definitely, create a post-it or put in my calendar. I agree with David. There's certain things I have to put in my calendar. I don't want to accidentally miss them. But then there are the other things, the steps I take along the way to reach the goals. So I would say a hybrid, because you definitely want to have time for those other things that come along throughout your day that you can do, and not think, oh my gosh, I can't pick up the phone and speak to that person, or I can't take a break because it's not on my calendar. So I'm going to just keep on pushing along on the stuff. There are days like that. I think we all have days where we just have to get stuff done. But generally speaking, with everything, with finances, social time, I think having some intention with some purpose is really a great way to make sure you don't have regrets.
Man, it's funny how we're a continuum, guys. So maybe this is know yourself, because if it isn't on my calendar, while David, I may know the perfect thing to do and you go do it, I will never do it in a million years. I just don't. I will waste that time if I don't have it on my calendar. And I can't tell you why, but I do know that if I fence off time and say, this is what I'm going to do at this particular time, and I don't let myself choose in the moment, I will choose correctly. And at a time when I am fully awake and thinking about my goals. So it's funny how we're exact opposites on this way. So you think it's know yourself?
Well, I do, but I also, like in our case, I think it's important to have rhythms and routines. So it's not that you're completely open. Like I don't have a lot on my calendar, but I mean, I know I have to do a podcast because we sold sponsorships. I know, I want to work on my book. I know we have these things, these goals. I just don't want the goals to be so domineering that you give up the optionality and the flexibility in the moment of what's most important. So yeah, it's probably a hybrid.
Yeah, and I would throw in, it's one of the beauties of financial independence is in financial independence, a lot of people can do exactly what David is saying, which is you put 2 or 3 things on your calendar that don't take up the whole day, but a few little marks to separate out your day. And then the rest of it can be completely fluid for these longer term projects, like writing a book, like doing a podcast, like
but
whatever
it's funny
it is
though, Doc, because but it's funny because I'm financially independent and I don't, and still you know what I mean? I prefer to fill up my calendar. It just, I get stuff done. And it has nothing to do with money. It has to do with my feeling a purpose of fulfilling all these other things that I want to do. Fourth on this list is physical wealth. Alissa, where do you come down on this idea of physical wealth?
Well, I think it goes to health, right? And the importance of, taking care of ourselves. So if we live a long time and we have lots of time and we have the money and we have the social ability, do we take care of ourselves enough so then we can enjoy all of that? Because one of the things that article also discussed was you could end up having enough money and all the other things, but if you're not healthy, you might not be able to enjoy all those other things that you have available to yourself. So I think it's really important. I will just be totally frank on this. I think that sometimes, for myself at least, it's hard to balance it all. There's certain things that I feel, certainly financially, I feel I'm pretty good at balancing that. And I, like David, it was at an early age that I was sort of obsessed with finances. So for me, that's one of my strengths. I do like the way I feel when I exercise, but sometimes there's just so many things that we're juggling and it's hard to balance. So I think most importantly is balancing all these things. We can know it, we could be intentional or purposeful, but finding a system, like you were saying, Joe, whatever system works for you, that is the right system, right? I mean, for me, I feel it's hybrid, but I definitely, I have some Post-its for what I'm doing this week each day. And it makes a difference for me because I have something to check in on. But whatever it is, find a way to make it work for you so you don't miss out on taking advantage of all these things.
That system worked great for me when I was younger, by the way. I took at the start of on a Sunday evening when I was planning my week, I just put a bunch of priorities up on Post-its on the wall of my office. And then I took them down as the week went on. And that was a fun way because then I could be purposeful, but at the same time, I wasn't fencing it off. David, physical wealth?
Get out and walk. I mean, it's important. And I think the best way what we've learned over millennia is walking is healthy. It's what we're designed to do. And just, if you don't have time to go to a gym, just get out and walk, clear your head, maybe listen to a podcast, maybe don't. And I think, I know I used to walk once a day. When the pandemic hit, I found myself with panic attacks and found myself at one time at 3 a.m. in bear country walking because I couldn't stand to be in the house. And I was so freaked out. And from that day on, I walk twice a day because that's what I need to do from a mental health standpoint, just to get out in the nature. And I think that that goes a long way to physical health. And the studies support that. We did one on our show. We referred to, I think it was Sardinia or Spain. Spain have high life expectancy. They tend to walk more. They average 5,000 steps a day. Spaniards, with other people in the plazas or whatever, they also get the social connection with the walking. I think that's a key to physical health.
Doc, I went to you last because we always go for health. We go to the medical doctor last. We ask our friends first.
So let me again give you a non-doctor answer. Let's drop the issue of longevity, right? So yes, if you exercise, you're going to live longer. But let's say you don't like exercise. You're like, I could live less time, but I'd be happier versus I could exercise and live longer.
It's quality, not quantity, right?
Right. But let me add to that. So we talked about dopamine before. You're talking about the phone and dopamine. Dopamine is like the cocaine of neurohormones. What happens is it gives you a fast high and it gives you a horrible come down. And it generally doesn't make you happy long-term. But you know what does make you happy? Other neurohormones, things like oxytocin and endorphins, and exercise increases those. And so I think exercise makes you happier. Yes, it also makes you live longer. I think it makes you more healthy. I think you manage stress and other things better. But ultimately, instead of going for those dopamine hits, which we get from spending money, or for some of us from saving money, and from a lot of us from our phones, if we can start getting more oxytocin and endorphins from things like exercise, I think we'll generally be happier.
Oh my God. Half an hour after a good solid run, I get on some days the biggest runner's high. And it is just a fantastic feeling. All of a sudden I just feel just fantastic. And what a great place to be. He ends this with eternal wealth, which he says that James Clear has 4, but for him, it's spiritual wealth. He talks about, he's got stuff from the Bible in here, but when we talk about eternal wealth, where do you guys come down on this type of wealth, David? Something maybe beyond, I don't know, beyond ourself or beyond just today, maybe even beyond, like he's talking about this life.
Well, one of the things Fritz mentioned is to listen to, call it the spirit, call it, intuition or inner voice, but to realize there is more beyond what we're experiencing every day. And, there's different ways. Some people have a religious view, you have a Buddhist view, but the point is there's something else, right? And so it pays to listen to whatever that something else is, and that can help guide our sense of purpose. And so I think that is a type of wealth. If it's just the physical, what's there in front of us, we're missing out on a lot of what's out there spiritually, depending on whatever one's beliefs is. But they've documented there's something else. You can't explain it. And that's the beauty of it. It's unexplainable, but it's something real. And I think that's what Fritz is tapping into.
I think it is interesting how, physical wealth, time wealth, and social wealth all really kind of, we talk about purpose, this idea that there's something bigger than us, maybe for me, that's a lot of it. Alissa, what'd you think when you read this piece?
So I definitely think if there's, if you feel connected to religion, that there are also ways to make that a part of your life and think about those other aspects of wealth and really connect them together, such as the social, how you spend your time, whether you, with purpose, you volunteer at an organization that's important. But I also think about it when I read it about what are you leaving when you're no longer here? What are people going to think about when they think about you, especially your loved ones? And so something that's always been important to me since my kids were babies and I first did an estate plan, when the attorney asked me, so what are you guys going to do with everything if something happens to all of you? And I remember thinking, what an awful thing to ask, even though I knew that makes sense.
Sure.
And as an attorney, I wasn't surprised, but I had babies. Like, why do I have to think about this now? It's hard enough doing your estate plan. But I think anyone who is listening to this to think about your estate plan and what you want to leave behind, what you want your family to know that was important to you, and whatever size gift it might be, to put that as part of your estate plan, because that's your legacy too. The reality is most money that is left to people is dissipated within, they say, 2 to 3 generations. And some people have spent the money before they actually even get it. So it's okay. If there's something that's important to you, I think that you should leave your legacy to the causes that are most important to you. And it's also a great way for other generations to see what was important to you.
Doc?
So since I'm not an amazingly religious person, when I think about eternal wealth, I also think legacy and impact. But unlike Alissa, I don't think about financial legacy and impact. I think about our legacy and impact as people. And so I believe there's this thing called generational growth. We know what generational trauma is. We've all talked about things like money scripts, right? This idea that we hand down from generation to generation these stories or these narratives about things that don't serve the next generations. And we talk especially about this with money, right? When we see our parents have financial trauma, the kids end up playing that out in their lives. I think there's this thing called generational growth where when we live these deeply purposeful lives, the people around us see us living those purposeful lives and we model that kind of behavior. And that's a legacy that we hand down that actually has a huge amount of impact. I'll give you a really quick story. My grandfather from my mother's side, I never met him. But this guy loved math. It was like a big part of his purpose. And he was an accountant. And when my mom was little, he used to sit there in the 1950s and he had his big spreadsheets and he would sit my mom on his lap and he would show her what he was filling in each box. And he would talk about the finances, et cetera. So my mom saw him modeling that deeply joyful behavior, not to make money, but because he liked it. She tried on that identity, the same thing he was, and she decided she liked math and she became a CPA. Now, I was born and I had a major learning disability. I actually was really bad at reading. I was well behind the people in my grade. But the thing was, I had connected, just like my mom and her grandfather, I had connected to this idea that I was good at math because my mom was good at math and she shared that with me when I was a little kid. So even though I couldn't read, I was well ahead in math. Not only did that give me the confidence to move forward, but I eventually became a doctor, which was a very mathematical field. And one day I was taking care of a patient in the hospital who had a problem. He kept on getting admitted over and over again, very dehydrated, almost near death. And I noticed a mathematical connection between 2 of his lab tests. And we diagnosed him with a very rare disease. And actually, there was a simple medication to give him, and it probably saved his life. Now, this guy, he was a pastor, and he had a church, and they brought in homeless children, runaways, and fed them and gave them a place to sleep. So if you think about it, my grandfather, who died before I was even born, who taught my mom about math because of the pure love and joy of it, his impact is still being felt today by some runaway kid who has a place to sleep and eat. That's generational growth. No one knows my grandfather's name. He's not written in any history book. But him doing things that were really important to him, things that he loved, actually changed the world. It left a legacy, it left an impact, and 80 years later, it's still changing the world today. So when we talk about this article, we're talking about our monetary wealth, we're talking about our social wealth, we're talking about our time wealth. All of that actually is what we want to use as fodder to change the world. And I think we do that through purpose, and I think we do that by doing things we deeply enjoy.
Tell us how you really feel, man.
As you can tell, I've thought a lot about these kind of things.
Stop covering it up. This idea, I think there's something to do with purpose that you're trying to get across. I don't get it. Yeah. You're not passionate about it at all.
No, not at all.
I think that's a fantastic place to leave it. What a lovely testament to your grandfather, and just something for us to all think about.
Never met him, died before I was born.
These little things that we do every day can be so impactful, not just to us and building wealth, but the wealth of the community around us. Let's talk about your communities, because the reason we have you all here is because you're community leaders. And I love the work that all of you do. Alissa, thank you so much for hanging out with us again. It's been too long, like it has been for David, been way too long. What's going on right now at Amplify My Wealth? What do you got on the calendar coming up?
So I've just been trying to be as consistent as possible about increasing my content on Instagram. So for anyone who's looking for financial literacy content, to help amplify their wealth. Definitely Instagram is the place to go. Also on LinkedIn,
It's super
I'm
fun.
doing that
It's
too.
super fun.
So that's really my focus outside of my clients, as far as Amplify My Wealth goes right now, because I want to make sure whether people are getting financial advice or not, that they have tools that they can rely on.
Yeah, LinkedIn is someplace I need to be more, and I'm not. I'm just like, where am I going to? Speaking about time wealth. I'm like, yeah, I should, but apparently it's not a priority for me. But I look at what goes on there every time I'm on LinkedIn, and it seems like such a great platform. David, thank you so much for hanging out. Speaking of too long, man, it's been, geez, maybe since the pandemic or maybe even before.
Prior. Yeah.
It's been a while, but what's going on? What's coming up? Give us some preview of what's coming up soon here at Money for the Rest of Us.
We just recorded an episode this morning on how retail traders are losing big and enriching Wall Street, with all the 0 days to expire options and how that impacts the overall market. So we're covering that. We recently covered buffer ETFs. We took a close look at the crippling home insurance crisis, the people facing 30%, 50% increases, in our case, 70% increase in home insurance.
Wow.
Premium. And so what do we do about that? What's causing that? So those are some of the topics. We're approaching episode 500 after 10 years. So we just keep churning them out.
I can't believe we've been doing it this long, man.
I know.
It doesn't seem like we've been doing it this long.
Still fun now. I was telling the pro, I had a great time pulling together this morning's episode. That's how you learn. You learn by teaching.
There's definitely a few things I'd rather do than be hanging out with you guys right now. We will link to, by the way, Amplify My Wealth and Money for the Rest of Us on our show notes at Stacky Benjamins. And of course, the amazing Earn and Invest podcast. Doc, I'm going to ask you, I know you got some cool stuff coming up because you and I have chatted about it before, but all of our stackers don't know what's on the agenda.
So this week, our Monday episode was Garrett G., who wrote a book called The Hacker Mindset. This guy was pulled out of high school at 15 to go work for the government. He is a white hat hacker, and he tells us how to use the hacker mindset to live a better life, win at money and life. And then the Thursday episode is Miloš Maričić. He started something called the Altruist League. He uses AI to help people do philanthropy better. But what we talk about is what he learned through philanthropy about what makes us happy. So 2 really interesting conversations.
And that's at Earn and Invest, where finer podcasts are distributed, like Money for the Rest of Us. All right, that's going to do it for today. Doug, man, what should be on our to-do list today? All right, guys, we're going to do something a little different than we've done because Doug is currently in Scotland playing golf. And we didn't know what you were going to say. I'm going to go to David and Alissa and ask you guys what your big takeaway is for everybody. All right. So I'll go to David first, and then I'll go to Alissa second. And Doc, you're off the hook. All right.
My biggest takeaway was...
Well, hold on a second. Hold on. You'll hear it in the script. So Steve, you're going to cut me out, and I'll just cue David and then cue Alissa. So what should be on our to-do list today? First, take some advice from David Stein. David, what was your big takeaway today?
My big takeaway was Josh's story about his grandfather, how generational wealth, the small things we do, it's like the butterfly effect, can affect generations ahead. And so it's important to use the type of wealth that's available, time, physical, monetary, to do our small part, and that flywheel can grow, and it can have unknown impacts decades, if not centuries ahead. And
then Doug's going to say this. And if you want another, maybe better one, just kidding, David, that was awesome. But if you want another, how about this big takeaway from Alissa Maizes?
So in order to do exactly what David was talking about, I think it's really important to realize that we all do things differently. And just because we see that someone does something a certain way, it might not be the right way for us. So definitely figure out what's best for you and then work on achieving the goals around the different things that we talked about today, the financial, social, time, and physical wealth, as well as the eternal, to create a plan that makes you feel good and get the most out of your life.
So what's the biggest to do? I might need to get a new bike before the Tour de Texarkana kicks off. The banana seat on mine isn't good for long distances, and I think these cards in the spokes might create some drag. All right, now I'm going to go to each of you for the credits and just smile and wave when I do your credit. Thanks to David Stein for joining us. You'll find his awesome podcast, Money for the Rest of Us, wherever you're listening to us now. Thanks to Alissa Maizes for hanging out with us today. Find out more about her at amplifymywealth.com. Thanks also to Doc G for joining us. Want to hear more from the nicest guy in podcasting? Sorry, Joe. Tune into Earn and Invest wherever the finer podcasts are found. All right, we did it. Let's see what's going on with all you crazy people hanging out with us. Let's see.
I don't want to hear more trash about how I don't win at the trivia. That's all I can say. No more trash about that. I'm taking it personally, guys. I'm taking it personally.
Katie, who's at Harris, said she has a certain credit card. Duh. Yeah. Doing the credit card reward points. Aaron says, David must be retired. Otherwise you need lists because you forget important stuff. I don't think, David, you don't forget important stuff.
I don't know. If it's super important, it gets texted to me like a friend's birthday. It shows up in an email or text. And,
you're true.
Otherwise, yeah, that's how you got to write down the important stuff.
And we were talking about health and prioritizing, Alissa, and Aaron says, I like the way I feel. I like the way I feel when I'm eating donuts. So that's good.
Who doesn't? It's after you eat the donut that you don't feel good.
And Aaron also says, by the way, also the Lions always seem to find a way to choke on a hairball. Hey, Aaron, stop it. Not this year, man. He says, at least the Packers always have cheese. Well, that is true. I remember going to watch the Packers and the Lions back in the day at the Pontiac Silverdome where the Lions used to play, and they had to cut off the beer early because there were too many fights in the stands between the Packers fans and the Lions fans. Like at halftime, they were cutting the beer sales off, which was horrible.
You know, they all had their flasks anyway.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. If you're a true pro, right?
You got your flask. Yeah.
All right, contributors, I want you guys to hang out with me for just a second longer. We're going to say goodbye to everybody on YouTube. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you guys. Actually, I'll be back tomorrow. We're going to be recording the following week's episode, which includes, because it's going to be the same day as the opening ceremonies for the Olympics. Listen to this, guys. Lauren Williams, who's the first woman to medal in both the Summer and Winter Olympics, is going to be our guest on that panel. So she's going to be helping us kick off the Olympics. So we'll see you guys tomorrow at the same time. All right. We'll say goodbye to YouTube right now. All right. Then I got to shut this off.